Hello, everybody. This is Rogelio, your program coordinator of Trans Connections, here for a very special episode of The Link. The Link is a collaboration brought to you by APLA Health's Prevention Department, Pyro Media Network, and is funded by the CDC. And today we're doing a very special event for Trans Day of Visibility. Now, Trans Day of Visibility is tomorrow. We have our official big event. But in the meantime, we thought it would be a great idea to bring on the Trans Support Team here to talk a little bit more about our services, talk about our personal experiences, what we bring to our work, and also always have time to, talk a little bit about pop culture too. So I'll give everybody a chance to introduce themselves. Again, I'm Rogelio, pronouns they, them. I'm the program coordinator of Trans Connections, our HIV prevention and wellness program for trans people of color 18 to 29. And I'll hand it over to Melissa next.
Hey everybody, I'm Melissa Marquette. I am the Transgender Wellness Program Manager. I am out of the Long Beach Clinic. I'm really excited to do this takeover. It's a little bit different than the regular show that's playing, but with Trans Day of Visibility here, it's just really important that we send a message from APLA out to everybody that APLA affirms trans health and trans rights. So thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. Skylar.
Hi, everybody. My name is Skylar Combs. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am a prevention training specialist for the Trans Connections program, like Melissa, also out of the Long Beach location. I'm really excited to be here today, talk about pop culture, what's going on with our programs, and with Trans Day of Visibility coming up tomorrow, really excited to just show our faces and show that we're here.
Muted.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mallory Jenna Robinson. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a prevention specialist here with APLA's Trans Connections as well. I'm so excited to be joining in on this special epi of The Link. I'll be coming in with conversations about our artist program, which is going to be our anti-retroviral and assisting supportive services program for anyone who is trying to get linked back into care for being HIV positive. So I look forward to talking more about that and then just also my own personal experience. Thank you.
Yes. So lovely team we have, as everybody can see. And today, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit more about our services, our personal experience. But before then, we always love to get in a bit of pop culture talk. There's a lot going on in pop culture. Yes, what's poppin'? So that is our first segment, what's poppin'? And there's a lot going on in pop culture right now, especially in regards to the trans community. So I wanted to open the floor up. Is there anything that's been on anybody's mind in terms of the trans community? I know a lot of us are talking about the anti-trans bills that are being passed all over the country. So first of all, what's everybody's opinion on that? I know that recently states like Arkansas, Alabama have moved to ban things like trans girls in sports and have also moved to ban affirming procedures, medical procedures for trans youth. And so I really wanted to get an idea of what everybody's was thinking in regards to that.
Yeah, I'd love to chime in. I'll kind of start off with the sports topic because it hits home a little bit. You can see I got surfboards over there. So I'm even though post-transition, I've remained to be very active athletically. I do compete in softball and everything like that. And I'm a retired professional athlete. I used to snowboard, did the X Games and everything, medaled in that. I was in the U.S. snowboard team and traveled internationally. But one thing I think that is really missing about this aspect of youth is, like, for me, like, since I reached like a very high echelon of competing and snowboarding, for me, I personally would never go back into snowboarding and start to try and compete as a woman, just because, like, I think I've reached such a high plateau that, like, I would have kind of a natural ability because I've competed before as pretending to be a guy, and I had the hormones and everything, and I kind of inherited a lot of that knowledge or strength, and just was able to compete at a higher level. But what's interesting and that's missing about all these bills that are being introduced about the trans in high school sports and everything, currently right now, these bills are aimed at nobody. There's nobody in those states that are actually even competing or trying to compete. So it's like this conversation that's happening about, well, what if, what could happen? And nothing's really happened yet. And also, I think that what people need to consider is that, when you're in high school, like, especially like, I mean, your freshman and sophomore year, you don't really have like, if we want to talk about testosterone, which is what this whole conversation is about, at that age, you really don't have a lot of testosterone pumping through you. So there's really no difference between boys and girls. And not to mention trans youth are, especially if you're talking about a trans woman, sometimes they're not the most athletically gifted people to begin with. They view themselves as a girl. They viewed themselves as a woman for such a long time that it's just like, really? Like, and bottom line, look, there's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of research that's been done out there that basically says there is no, especially at that age, there's no basically, I'm trying to think of the right words, but there's no competitive advantage for them.
Right. Exactly. Oh, yeah, all good information. And I think you speak to a lot of good different points that like a lot of these things are just fear mongering. They're like creating these crazy scenarios in their head that like, oh, well, if we allow this to happen, then little boys are going to pretend to be girls just to like win first place. Where if you all know, like, I'm sure a lot of little boys are not rushing to identify as girls because the social consequences they get, because of that would be like so major. There are so many boys who still like complain about even beating girls or when they're beat by girls in sports. So why would they put themselves in a position to compete? This is like the same fear mongering we get with like the bathrooms that like there's just this group of boys and men who will say that they are trans in order to take advantage of things that were meant to protect trans people and encourage participation from trans youth. And I think, oh no, go ahead, Mallory.
No, and I was going to say what you said was really interesting, what you mentioned about little boys. And I think that's why we have to remember, because I was 5 when I first knew that I was trans. So I didn't see myself as a little boy. Right. I saw myself as a little girl that looked very different from the other girls, but I still felt a girl. So that's where, like, if you can get people to realize that it's not about cis boys appearing to want to get into like cis female spaces. It's about a young trans woman wanting to be seen and validated, or a young trans man or a gender nonconforming individual. We need that accessibility in these places.
Right. Right.
I used to play sports a lot when I was a kid, and growing up as a woman, I played baseball, and I played baseball very well, and I played baseball at a state competitive level. I played baseball with boys. It got to the point where, like, in championships, they would make me wear a cup because they didn't believe me when I said I was a girl and I didn't need one. So, Melissa and Mallory were talking about that young age. For me, it was kind of the opposite, I guess, factor where I'm competing with boys as a young woman and still outperforming them, but I wasn't being recognized because I was a woman. And at that point in time, like, I threw better, I pitched better, I caught better, but they were still putting me in left field because they didn't want me in the front of the field with every other boy.
Right.
I'd actually been looking into this. So there's one of the spots where it's been going back and forth is Idaho. And the judge says that there's no legitimate interest to put this act into place in that state. Like Melissa was also saying, like everybody was saying, they're not targeting any specific person. There is no reason to be putting these in place. They're just there as, like you're saying, like that border, that like fear mongering thing, like, oh, what if this happens here? We need to like nip it in the bud. And that's just a lot of what I see as like mistrust and fear. And I think that's so silly to people. We're human beings regardless of anything. So why, I will comment this. I see in the boxing ring and the MMA thing, how there could be danger. I also have to look at that, as Melissa was also mentioning, these, if you have trained to a certain extent at a certain point in your life, it's like when people box, there's heavyweights, there's different weight levels that you go with depending on your weight, your strength, all that.
Right.
And so that's a little bit harder, I think, to judge. But that's the one that I've seen being put in the limelight more rather than these. But that's affecting all these other things.
Right.
I'm not necessarily putting the blame on that.
I think that gets lost in the conversation too. The fact that like all sports are inherently unfair. Sports is about competing, and everybody may have certain benefits or certain advantages because of whatever genetic qualities they have, because of however they may have been raised, like all of those things factor into it. Michael Phelps is able to swim very well because he has a disorder that makes his body like basically perfectly shaped to swim, and like nobody ever talks about that as being, an advantage. And especially when you think of like biological sex that varies a lot between people, there are cisgender women who have higher rates of testosterone and thus, produce body hair, have different, physiology. There's so much variance in all of this that it's all just kind of random. And what I'm also reminded of is the fact that people generally don't care about women's sports. Women's sports are always treated like a joke, the way that people always are constantly making jokes about the WNBA or like just not taking women's sports seriously. Now they want to make it a whole conversation. Those same people want to make it a whole conversation about the integrity of women's sports might be compromised by these trans girl super soldiers who are going to come in and, dominate everything. But also, trans people have been allowed to compete in the Olympics for years. I don't see many trans people who have gold medals, who have silver medals, who are over here out competing their fellow, competitors. And so, yeah, it's a completely made up fear mongering stuff. And I think that it also points to the fact, that like, progress isn't necessarily linear. We have come so far as a society, as a community in society, but that with that visibility, which, tying it back to TDOV, with that visibility also comes, a target on your back. Now they know that we're out there. Now they know that trans kids are out there and can also seek healthcare, and they're looking to attack that. And that's what's really concerning to me.
And I think one of the things that like is missing in the conversation, and Mallory, Rogelio, you touched on it a little bit, is the fact that like, it's in conversations. I've seen it in the media and the pieces, and it's like, it's this notion that like, once like being trans is the cool thing now, and it's gonna like want children to become trans, and it's like no. And I think that's one of the things that's missing is that I know that we have like a little bit of a saying in our community that like you would never wish trans on even your worst enemy, because being trans is definitely not an easy road in life. We do succeed, we're very resilient, and we can live and thrive very healthily, but it's just really interesting because it's like nobody really wants to be trans just to go and compete and win. I mean, that is just like, that fallacy is just so far-fetched,
right?
That I think we really need to kind of call that out and just say, nobody's going to transition just to go and compete. And further, I kind of touched on the fact that like, I did reach a really high level in snowboarding, but like if I was to step on a snowboard today and go up against some of the women, they're going to kick my butt. Like, just because women's sports have reached such a high level across many disciplines that like, even for somebody who does have like gifted abilities and have them throughout 10 years or so, there's no guarantee that you're even going to win.
Exactly. Does anybody else have anything to add? I really wanted to touch on the fact that like a lot of these stories are specifically also targeting trans youth and are attacking healthcare, which is super concerning. And it just like reaffirms that like, the work that we do is so important, providing trans people that safe space, letting them know that we are, there for them to help them in the process, to connect them to trans affirming care or whatever the case. So does anybody want to close on any of these statements before we move on to the next pop culture topic?
Sorry, did you mention healthcare, or is that the next one?
Oh, no, yeah, you could go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it's frustrating because I've been looking into it, and the age of the politicians or the people who are creating the larger vote, like combination of vote polling votes, are not the generation that is going to end up being here. Like these legislations, these laws are being created by people who don't understand, who are scared of new things, who are scared of change. Personally, I'm a millennial. I'm kind of on the tail end of that. And my parents are still kind of, have their issues working with it. But that being said, again, this is a reason why, on a side note, youth needs to vote, because the people who are voting and who are in legislation in Congress are not going to be here, or might not be here by the time we're around to have that opportunity. And so we really need to speak up for our voice, because they're not going to hear it unless we say something. And so like with that healthcare and these bills, seeing these people who are older than us that have no idea what we're going through or can't necessarily conceive it, or I would say that are not open-minded enough to, that's frustrating to, like, they get to reap the benefits and we get, the short end of the stick, when at the end of the day, it's going to affect us more than it affects them.
Exactly.
Even time-wise.
Right. Any other?
Yeah, I was going to add in there too, like, when you're talking about healthcare, I think, I've done some Facebook posts and somebody came back and said, just leave the children alone. And it's like, why would you leave a child that's suffering, that's having issues with their gender? Why would you leave them alone? And I think the notion is that a lot of people think that children are able to make up their mind and choose for themselves. And that's not quite the case. Yes, they are choosing for themselves, but you also have to understand that when you're going into a medical situation in a medical setting, you're actually bringing in mental health therapists, you're bringing in doctors and physicians, and the parents are involved in this conversation. It's just not the child saying like, oh, I want to be a girl, and it's off and running. There's a lot of science behind this. There's a lot of conversations that are happening. And so when people say leave the children alone, it's like, why would we allow another child to suffer? Like, I'm sure all of us in this chat have suffered, Why not, if there's a solution to bring that child happiness, why not look into that?
Exactly. I think you touched on two very important points there. The fact that, like, people always use the fact that so many trans people have, trigger warning, have committed suicide or have attempted to commit suicide, or have self-harmed or have a history with self-harm or addiction or whatever the case is. They always use that as a point to speak against the community instead of a point to realize that people feel that way because we are excluded from so many aspects of society. And studies show that if you give a child affirming care, if you help, trans people, trans youth, that those rates go down drastically, and also, like, to the point about people being rushed into transition, people are really pretending like they're catching, a young boy, like, trying on some heels, and they're like, okay, let's get you some hormones right away. Like, not even, jumping straight to that. But it's, like you said, a very long process that involves multiple medical professionals who make the decision that it's better for this child's health if they transition and take those moves instead of, continuing to live as they are, or have to experience puberty, of that they don't identify with, and that can cause even more harm in the long term,
Yeah, I absolutely agree with all three of you. I think it's so important for us to have these conversations about what's happening for someone who's from Alabama as well, where that is one of the places that the bill is being enacted. There's so many important conversations we have. There's so many different introspections that we can seep into, right? We can talk about the fact that there's a level of misogyny. So because I'm a trans child, I can't play with other cis kids because that's going to make them uncomfortable with my level of performance because of my gender. So therefore, we're already perpetuating that cis women are weaker than trans women. Like, that level of inferiority mindset where we're putting down trans individuals because of who they are. And therefore that, we know that they have the strong genes, or they have these capabilities of being able to outperform, cis athletes or cis partners in athletic spectrums. It's really heartbreaking to see. For someone who did track in high school, I started my transition around 16. So I remember going through the same fight in 2006, navigating through even, and let's take sports out of it, dance team. Right? So even when we start delving into the arts too, and performative arts, there's so much discrimination there too. I had to advocate for myself to be the only trans girl on my dance team from 2006 to 2008 before I finished high school. And I can tell you that it's those pieces that really keeps us going as a community, to remember to speak up, and speak out. And so I just want to just remind people of like just how preposterous that this all sounds, that because I'm a trans woman, I must automatically be stronger than a cis woman. But that's just that whole kind of binary concept that we keep working on. And when we start reducing those binary barriers, then we as an entire nation, as an entire community, can really start to come together.
Exactly. Wow. No, yeah, perfect. And I think that's the perfect way to close on that note. I did want to talk about some happy news. So does anybody have some happy news to share? Doesn't have to be trans related, but it would be nice. I'll open up the floor. If not, I do have a piece of non-trans news that I wanted to talk about. But
well, I think that I was just looking. What is it? Dr. Diane. What was her last name? She just was approved by the Senate for her position, and so like I think that that's a really big win.
right.
I think it's the first time that somebody has been nominated and approved for a position in the federal government that is trans.
Right.
And
In the
so
cabinet, right?
Yeah, so I think that that's a really good sign that, and when when they were looking at this individual and promoting them or trying to get them into this position, they weren't looking at this as a trans thing. They were just looking at her credentials and what she stood for and what she was doing. And it wasn't until the confirmation process that actually somebody brought it up and brought the whole trans thing in, when the trans piece shouldn't have even been a part of the conversation.
Which is why I was so happy to hear about her, because I feel like she was the Secretary of Health of Pennsylvania, I think, and now she's going to be promoted to be the Secretary of Health or some sort of similar position in the federal government.
Yeah, it's actually Dr. Rachel Levine. So I just
yes,
want to make sure we got that in there.
Right.
So,
say her name, Rachel Levine, everybody. Yeah, shout out to Rachel Levine. But I think that the thing that I thought was really great was that she was making headlines before just about the way that she would speak about COVID, the way that she handled COVID in Pennsylvania. And so I felt good that she was recognized for her skills and for her talent, and that she wasn't thrown this position as a token. She was thrown this position because she's just good at her job and happens to be trans. And I think that's the kind of representation that we need. I don't think giving anybody, trans people handouts or inclusion in things, even when we may not be the best representatives, does a service to the community. But I really am reassured, and Rachel Levine and various other people who are now involved in government, who have made won historic elections in 2020, who are now going to be representing not just trans people, but themselves, and themselves fully, without it needing to be, a trans thing per se, right?
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to talk about was Lil Nas X's video. I know it wasn't, it's not specifically trans related, but Lil Nas X is a Black queer artist, was, topping the charts, I think about 2 years ago with his song. What was the name of that song? Old Town Road. Old Town Road. This is a really good comment too. The thing about mandatory hormone checks, because this does affect not just trans people, but other people who deviate from gender norms, because what these kinds of policies do is reinforce binary systems. But yeah, Lil Nas X's video, I think, was super, in the headlines everywhere, because people were saying it was inappropriate or, so scandalized by it. I personally loved it. I thought it was amazing. I thought that the fact that he played every single role that was in that music video was just like, it was perfect. And I think that it wasn't any more raunchy than I'm used to seeing, especially from like, if you take like female rappers, a lot of them produce things just as bad or if not worse. But this became a big scandal because he was queer and because he was giving the devil a lap dance. So did anybody else see the video, and what were their thoughts?
My girlfriend showed it to me and I thought it was great. There were some posts about it on Facebook today and I can't remember the exact thing, but it was basically one of those like, why do you have a problem with it? Like, this is amazing. Like, why does it have to do with, the orientation or who he wants to be with, what he looks like? Like, this is quality music. This is quality production. Why does the sexuality and gender portion need to be put into this? Like, at all? He's a performing artist. Let's leave it at that.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. I definitely like I am a huge fan of him from, Old Town Road. And I just think he's so great with his music, artistry, his music collaborations with individuals like Billy Ray Cyrus as well. So let's keep that in mind on how again we're building those communities, from someone who's part of the queer community like Lil Nas, and then you have someone who's part of a very cis hetero background, very traditional music approach like country music from someone who's from the South. So I know how traditional they can be in their music approach. So I'm hoping that despite some of the feedback not being so receptive, that in time, like with a lot of trends and things, that people are getting used to, that this will be one that, and I hope to see this with more artists too, where they are comfortable playing dual roles with multiple binaries. I mean, why not? Why not express yourself and really break away from this misconception that you have to be this male performing artist that is having tons of video vixens around to get a point across. We all know that, that a lot of the rappers prefer, a certain type of woman. They prefer a certain type of image for their brand. But Lil Nas is really breaking the mold, and it's really being so amazing with the way that they are continuously just, working with the community. And I think it's great. I know it's not going to appeal to everyone, but it's a start.
Right.
Well, yeah, and Little Nas, he's a performer. This is his platform. Who are we to decide how, in where, and why he should use his platform? This is his way to express his feelings. And it's interesting because I think we're in a society where everybody gets offended by everything, and I hear it even a lot on the left. I hear it on the right. But when you have somebody like this that comes out with like a really great performance, then all of a sudden you have people on the right, that are upset, and they're crying about it. And it's like, well, wait a minute, like you can't cry on both sides. Look,
Right.
let people be the performers they are. And if you don't want your children to see that, great. Don't allow your children to see it. We're not telling you how to raise your children. But with the internet and everything out there, children today are exposed to a lot more, and thankfully, I think that's a great thing. I think to like all of us, I think we can agree that being trans and the internet, being there and being able to see something and being able to see a celebrity like put a nod to gender, it just really helps our confidence. So, Lil Nas, keep going, keep going.
Right. I love that, like, in a lot of times when gay people, gay men, or queer people, queer men are uplifted in the media, it tends to be like the most normative, most like, masculine, often presenting and acting people in order for us to be comfortable. So I just love that he is being unapologetic and is taking up space in this very cis and heteronormative world, So yeah, shout out to Lil Nas X. I definitely wanted to include that in. But it is now time for our first commercial. So after that, we'll be back to talk a little bit more about our personal experiences and a little bit about our services. So stay tuned for that, everybody.
Hey guys, Ty here from APLA Health, and I got some good news for you.
APLA Health is launching our first ever at-home HIV testing initiative.
As we battle the global pandemic of COVID-19 and all that it entails,
APLA Health is doing what we can to fill the gaps for those who are in need of knowing their status, linking to care, and having safer sex options.
The initiative, officially known as Swab and Chill, will be our virtual hub for those seeking to take an HIV test, receive HIV kits, link into medical care for those who are HIV positive, while also having access to several other programs and services that specialize in harm reduction for HIV infection.
Such services include private PEP information, as well as substance abuse services. Our goal with Swab and Chill is to make HIV testing easily accessible and easy to use within the comfort of your own home.
We provide each client with the Aura Quick at-home testing kit. This kit is a simple test that is done by orally swabbing the gums and waiting 20 minutes for your results.
APLA staff is available to virtually assist you while taking the test, while providing resources and support for those who may test positive.
Maybe you already know your status and you're just low on condoms and lube due to accessibility. No problem. We can also send you one of our safer sex kits right to your front door.
As we strive to keep our community safer and well-informed, your privacy is also a high priority.
All packaging will appear from APLA Health. Our over-the-phone assessments are quick, easy, and secure, so you can feel safe in sharing your results with us and asking any questions that you may have.
If you or someone that you know is interested in having one of our at-home testing kits mailed to you, or you just want more information on what Swab and Chill we provide, please call one of our team members at 323-329-9713, or just email us.
Come swab and chill with 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 us.
Yes, that transition music gets me every time. It always gets me going.
I am loving this. I just have to say, for someone who's a first kind of appearance on the link, I just have to say that this is absolutely amazing. Like, I love the way that it looks. And you know what? I think we need to have our own little show because, like, this is amazing. I'm sorry. I just have to give kudos to the amazing tech team and who's just doing such a great job. But I mean, I love this. I think this is something great that we could put on our own Trans Connections page.
Right, no, for sure. And we'll definitely continue having more of you on as guests. I know we definitely want to diversify the main cast a little bit and bring in more people. So you could definitely come on as a guest. And shout out to the Pyro team for making all that stuff happen, all those cute transitions, music, everything, yes. So now we're going to get into the bulk of our conversation, or the main topic, which is, Trans Day of Visibility. And I wanted to use this time to speak specifically to our own personal stories so that we can give people an idea of what exactly we're bringing to our roles. So I know that I let everybody know to prepare a little something. But yeah, that's what we're going to do. Talk a little bit about our stories and connect it to the work that we do here at APLA. So Melissa, would you mind starting us off?
Sure, I'd love to. So ever since I was really little, I knew that there was something different. And the one thing is that I couldn't really quite put my finger on it. I think it's like a lot of trans youth growing up, or trans women growing up, girls growing up, we're often trying on our mother's or sister's clothing. Unfortunately, I did not have a sister. I had a mom, nothing fit me. So of course I looked really awkward and weird. And I really never knew what it was. But through my life, it was kind of good, but also bad is we moved around a lot. My dad was a branch manager for an organization, and every 1.5 to 2 years I moved. I can't even tell you, I think I went to like 8 or 10 different schools growing up, which was interesting because every time we moved, I was always trying to fit in and working on fitting in. Fast forward, what I see now is what happened was it never gave me a chance to work on me and understand and learn who I was, because I was so wanting to try to fit in. When I graduated from high school, I was already competing on like a top amateur level for snowboarding. And so rather than jump into university right away, what I decided to do was to pursue snowboarding and try and go after it professionally. I achieved that. And what ended up happening was, again, that kept me so busy. I mean, I was at home maybe 7 days out of a month. I was always traveling the world, doing things. I was part of the US snowboard team, went to 19 different countries, competed in 9 Winter X Games. And it was up until about 2006, I was actually trying to make the Olympic snowboard team. Unfortunately, I didn't make it, but that's okay. I came up a little bit short. But what's interesting was At 2006, I was experiencing a lot of back issues. I know I had beat up my body for a really long time, and I knew that I did need to pursue my education. So in 2006, I decided to retire. What happened was I was not even close to being prepared for. And I think every athlete experiences it when they exit, and it's like, okay, now all of a sudden you have to redefine yourself because you're no longer a professional athlete. And so really what I was kind of experiencing was like a midlife crisis without being midlife, because I was having to find a new kind of a new title or new role, because no longer was I a professional snowboarder. Like, who was I? And I was no longer traveling. And all of a sudden, that is when this whole transness thing just like nailed me, like full center. Because there was already some tidbits that were already out there that I knew something was different. And thankfully, at 2006, the internet had come a long ways. And so I started looking into this and figuring out like what's going on, because like for the longest time, I personally thought that there was something really wrong with me. But I also knew that there couldn't be something really wrong with me because I was doing well. Like, you know, I achieved a level in professional competing. I had lots of friends. I had lots of loved ones. I was loved by a lot of people. So it was like, even though I knew there was something wrong with me, I also felt that there wasn't something wrong with me. Speed that up, I found out, oh, okay, being transgender is something. And I learned about people out there that are successful. And I realized at this point, it was actually doing me more harm by hiding from myself, from not understanding who I was. So at that point, I decided to kind of come out. And when I came out, I made a promise to myself. I said, hey, look, you know, you've always been somebody who is outspoken. And when I do transition, I want to continue and to use that voice. And so when I did transition, I decided to become an advocate. I like the word being advocate over an activist, because I think being an advocate, it comes from basically wanting to educate others and to use your own platform to not go out there and protest, but to use your voice in in a different manner to promote change. So I got involved with the North County LGBTQ Center in North County, San Diego, and Oceanside. And it was a great place for me to get my roots in advocating for others. And since then, it's just the kind of that being an advocate and going through transition. And now that I've kind of felt like I've transitioned, although we always continue to transition, even trans people, even cisgender people transition. It's just their transition looks a little different. But coming into APLA, I knew that I was going to be able to utilize my background and the skills that I've harnessed. I'm also a certified life coach. I facilitated support groups for 6 years for trans individuals. And so I knew coming into APLA as a transgender wellness program that I was going to be able to utilize everything that I've learned through life to basically facilitate and make our program at APLA better for other trans individuals. And so like right now, I'm like really happy to, share that we've got a really good base program of, just general care. We do HRT. We also do, if it's talking about STIs, STDs, or HIV, we do all the testing that's there. One of the things that I'm really thankful for is that we do have mental health therapy. Mental health is really, really important because, when you're transitioning, it's and I think there's this misnomer that a lot of people, when they think about being trans and mental health, they think about like, oh, I need to go talk to a mental health therapist to figure out if I'm trans. Well, yes, it helps to talk to that mental health therapist, but that mental health therapist isn't going to be the one that's going to say you're trans, because there's no test to figure out like whether you're trans or not. But in talking with people, they're going to help flush out, okay, what level is this? And is this something to the degree where, yes, you are trans, but do you want to transition? And those are two different things. And I could go off on another tangent on that, but I won't. But mental health is really important. And if you are considering transitioning, team up with a mental health therapist, because in the transition period, it's really rough. You get banged up a lot. You get a lot of abuse, not from yourself, but from other people, just putting and spewing hate on you. And you need that mental health therapist to talk about those issues so it rolls off your back, so you can keep moving forward. Because one of the things we want to do at APLA is we want to make sure that when somebody does transition, that they come out the other side smiling and happy, and that they can enjoy what they are there for. A couple other things too is we do dentistry in our Long Beach clinic. So that's always awesome, because I know just for anybody, going to the dentist is traumatic. I mean, especially if you're getting a drill put into your tooth, whatever. So it's already going to be traumatic. Working and coming to an office that is transgender affirming, I think is really great. And the fact that we do dentistry, we can really limit the impact that's going to really happen as far as the pain that you're going to feel, because you're already going to feel pain from the dentist, unfortunately. So, and, one of the things we're really doing is we're looking at expanding the healthcare options that we have. There's going to be a lot of great news coming from our program, talking about how we're going to expand and talk about maybe potentially some new things that we're adding on, and we're continuing to do that. So, just to kind of pass it along, I'm really happy to be here. I'm really glad to be a part of APLA, and I'm just excited to bring something to the team.
Great. Yeah, a lot of great tidbits in there. And I love hearing these stories, because I always am able to see the ways that I relate to some aspects of it, the ways in which my journey has been a little different in some aspects. And then you tying it back to, the work that you're doing here at APLA is so important, because, that's what we're really trying to do, make this process as easy as possible. Like, life is hard enough as a trans person. It shouldn't be hard to get, your medical care, your health care, access to trans affirming services. So thank you so much for that, Melissa. Thank you for sharing your story and just having that moment with us. It's always nice to get to know, people on the team a little bit more. So next, let's pass it on to Skylar.
Right. So a little background. I grew up in Pasadena, which is a very small, waspy or very heteronormative town in northern Los Angeles. I pretty much knew I was trans since I was about 5 years old, but I didn't know it was a thing. It wasn't until I saw Chaz Bono when I was in my teen years that I did. But I grew up, like I said before, being a little boy. Essentially, I played baseball. I had short hair. My parents didn't care what I wore. But at one point, when society started hitting me and saying, "You're a girl, why do you have short hair? You're a girl, why don't you wear, girls' clothes?" That's when it started hitting me. Rogelio had also mentioned the possibility of, people with self-harm, suicidal tendencies or attempts because of being trans. Addiction was one that hit me. I had nowhere to go, no one to talk to. I didn't have really anybody within the LGBT community that I knew about around me to talk about what was going on, to talk about my transition and what was going on inside me. I didn't even have the words to say it to my mental health provider at that time. So I took a real long trip down the rabbit hole. And it took me a long time to even realize what transitioning meant to me. I had to clean up my act. I had to sober up. I had to look at myself in the mirror and say, this is not who you want to be. So what do we have to do to make you, you? What do we have to do to make me happy? And so in 2015, I had really, I had comprehended that I was trans, and then I got in a relationship and she said she didn't want to be with a man. And I said, okay, I'll stay how you want me to be. Little tip for everybody. Don't change yourself for anybody, because I was miserable at the end of that, more so than I was before I decided I wanted to transition, because I knew what I wanted to do, but I was holding it back. Now the way that ties into this for me is when I did come back to the LA area and I knew I wanted to transition, finding care was not as hard as I thought it was going to be compared. So 2018 to 2015, big difference in LA County for me personally. But the idea that finding support groups. Like I said, I really enjoy therapy. I think working on my mental health really keeps me going on a day-to-day basis. It helps me. It doesn't always help everybody, but I personally am so grateful for it. That being said, though, liking those groups and not being able to find more than one for trans men was really discouraging for me. It really scared me. Going into a new group just coming out as trans in general was very hard. And going into groups where I didn't see people that looked like me or that identified, and had a linear story as me, at the same time, we have similar experiences, but when they're not quite as linear, there are some parts that are a little harder to relate to, and the fact of like maybe trauma or any sort of other thing. So I was looking for a support group for trans men and I could not find one. And that's something that since I've gotten into working within the LGBT community, I've always really tried to advocate for. I've always talked about because it has still not really changed. It is something that I would love to see more of. And so upon coming to APLA, I was told that we have a group that had, temporarily been paused called Club Triangle. It's Thursdays from 5 to 7 p.m. Now, this is not specifically for trans men, but it is an open space for trans folk to come in. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be therapy. We sit there and we talk about pop culture. We usually have a topic. And sometimes we sit there and we just talk about our days and what's going on, and having that, structured, but also loosely, a more relaxed space where I can, me, myself, you, anybody, we can all talk on a human level. It doesn't have to be always clinical. Support groups I love because it is not clinical. It is people who have been through the same things that you've been through, or if they haven't, you can at least, throw things around each other. I sometimes have a hard time talking to clinical people because, okay, you read the book about what I'm going through, but have you been through what I'm going through? So having these groups like Club Triangle, being able to come there for a couple hours a week is such a cool opportunity, even for me to be able to facilitate. And I know that I wish I had had a group like that when I had first started my transition. So that's what we do on Thursdays, again, 5 to 7 p.m. You can find it on our Instagram or the Facebook. We'd love to have you there. I know I really wish I could have had it. And like I said, it helps me to facilitate. So hopefully we'll see some new faces there.
Right. No, yeah. A great plug for Club Triangle. I think that one of the things that I really appreciate is that we try to make it as open as possible, right? So like, even if you are somebody who's questioning your gender, even if you're somebody gender nonconforming, but feel comfortable enough in this space to share whatever you want to share, or to even sit back and watch as the group goes on. I think it's important that we create those spaces for anybody in the trans umbrella or the gender diverse umbrella to really be in community with one another, since there are so many, unique stories, but common struggles that unite all of us. And next we can throw it to Mallory.
Thank you all. And I just I'm a history brain. So I like to kind of throw out, I'm very chronological and how I rethink things, how I introspect. I want to take you all back to 1995. I was 5 years old. I remember going up to my parents being like, I'm a little girl. And they were like, okay. So I can remember that summer of 1995, getting my hair growing out. I can remember feeling so proud in that moment. And then fast forward to August of that year, I get into the classroom and I'm presenting as this little girl, and my school says, no, that is not how you're presenting. It's not your name, your legal name. It's not what we understand. And honestly, I had to go back into the closet. And then about 10 years later, a little over 10 years later, in 2006, I was 16 years old. I remember being so overwhelmed, so distressed, so distraught, so disheveled. And my best friend, Carlin, came up to me and said, what's wrong with you? Jay was my nickname at that time. And so I remember him saying, what's wrong, Jay? And I said, I am a girl. I said, I can't lie anymore. It was literally when we talk about these ideas of like being a youth and feeling like you want to harm yourself. This was a prime example of that moment where I felt like if I could not stand in my truth, then there was nothing else. And through time, through me sharing my truth, through me advocating at my school in Montgomery, Alabama, fast forward to 2008, I graduated female presenting. I took my pictures, my high school senior pictures. My classmates got me a date for senior prom. Humanity is there. There are a lot of people, even though we have a lot of political conversations that we talked about people wanting to really be anti-trans, but there are good people out here too. And I think that's so important to remember. Then in 2011, May of that year, I get the diagnosis that I'm HIV positive. I had started to feel a little faint, a little sluggish. I felt a little nauseous. I knew something was wrong. I was working as a server at that time for a barbecue place in the South. And I remember being 21 years old and I was like, I dropped the trays and I was like, oh my gosh, something's wrong. I go to the hospital. They tell me that I'm HIV positive. I go to the medical clinic, what we call it, the health department in the South. I go to the health department. They confirm it. But then there was hope. They said that you are undetectable. And as long as you stay on your antiretroviral medicines and get linked to care, then there's so much in store for you. My doctor, who not only turned out to be my doctor for my HIV, but he also became my doctor for my HRT. Through being discovered as HIV positive, I was able to get linked into care. And I was also able to begin hormone replacement therapy. So for the past 10 years now, I have lived my life authentically as a bird. I went to college, got a double bachelor's in biology and history. I went on and taught for 5 years, middle school biology and history. I've even been married to a cis man and divorced. So that shows you the American story there. I definitely didn't skip any beat when it comes to all American, right? And then finally, I got into trans healthcare here in LA and I love it. And one of the things that really brings me so much joy is being able to link my clients back into care. And one of those programs is called our Artist Program. And if you have a session with me or one of our amazing staff members here today, you can get an incentive of $20 per session for 5 weeks. And so this is a really great incentive for you to get back and connected to care. I already have one amazing client that I'm working with. Yeah, we're working on getting them connected to care. So please know that if you are newly diagnosed, if you have you been diagnosed for a while and you need to get back into care, reach out to us. We're here. We all may, look tough on screen, but we're all like big hearts and open minds. And so, from someone who is positive, I stand in no judgment. For someone who is Black and trans, I am of also the Afro-Caribbean experience. That's how we call it in our community, Afro-Caribbean for female, Afro for male. And so this really, all these intersectionalities brings us together in so many ways. And I think it's so important for people to understand that just because you're positive doesn't mean that you don't deserve to be in care. Just because you're positive doesn't mean that you're going to be detectable. And if you are positive and you need to get back linked into care, come and see us with our Artist Program. We can schedule it anytime for your availability. So again, for TDOV, for visibility, don't give up. Don't give in. Never, ever doubt yourself. Trust your journey. Trust the process. I knew in 1995 that I was transgender. I didn't know the term. I knew I was a girl, period. And when people ask me going forward, they say, Mallory, why is it that, you have this sense of like, you know who you are? I said, honey, because I'm a woman. And when I know who I am, can't anyone, I don't care if I have my hair pulled up, if I have my hair pulled down, I'm a woman through and through. And as long as I know who I am, I don't care what anyone has to say. And that's what visibility means for our community. And that's what it means for us. So thank you again.
Yes, beautiful, beautiful. I love all these stories. I love getting to just like know more about everybody's background and seeing how it all really connects perfectly to the work. Mallory's the newest addition to the team and she's been amazing. So I love hearing your story. And I guess now it's time for mine. But yeah, so my story is definitely a lot more recent than a lot of people here since I only started transitioning a year ago. But yeah, I could start at the very beginning, similar to what a lot of people were saying here. From a very young age, I knew I was different. But the way I focused was by putting so much of my attention into school. I was a nerd. I was one of those gifted kids through elementary, middle, high school. And so that was kind of my, avenue, my outlet that I let a lot of these feelings I was having about my gender, sexuality kind of manifest. And for the longest time, I think it also affected, my sexuality. Like I said, I feel like it was harder for me to come to terms with my sexuality because I was also dealing with gender issues and I just didn't know what they were. But luckily I was also, grew up in, mostly the 21st century. I'm a Gen Z millennial cusper, born in 96. And so I was always raised around, knowing that trans people were a thing. The representations that I saw weren't always the best, but I always knew that trans people existed. And, a trans woman used to cut my hair in middle school. And my, mom was completely fine with that. And I think it just like having those very early moments where you're first exposed to the community, I think it was really helpful for me. But similar to something that Melissa said, I wasn't one of those people who, at a very young age was trying on my mother's clothes. I wasn't one of those people who at a very young age knew that I was trans and knew that was that affirmed in my identity. And then through college, it all kind of, went with it. I came out first as queer in 2015. I thought I was a queer man. And I lived like that throughout my college experience. And so many small moments were kind of just, I can look back to now and we're just like, oh, wow, like that just goes to show that my experience wasn't just of a queer man, right? And that's why I had so much discomfort around so many things. And my college experience actually got really, really difficult. The last 2 years, my mental health took a really, really hard impact. I was basically dragging my feet through my last semester, graduated with an incomplete on my transcript. So I didn't even finish the semester until 2 weeks after I left campus. And a lot of those reasons were because of all the gender issues I was dealing with. And it wasn't until I left college, till I had that space to kind of recover, until I was finally, able to pursue therapy again, that I was on this trajectory to kind of, self-discovery and honestly just getting my life together. I think having that stability in my life is what I needed to finally make the decision to transition and to realize that a lot of these questions I had, a lot of these, hesitancies I had were because I was trans and I needed to transition. And I think my journey also hasn't been very linear. I started transitioning a month before COVID hit. And so I, did not get a chance to be socialized around a lot of trans people. I was thrown into this position pretty quickly, managing, a transgender health program, which, I wanted to do, but it still put a lot of pressures on me that, I'm still kind of dealing with. A lot of that imposter syndrome about whether I'm trans enough to do my position or whether I'm, going to be taken seriously by people. And so I want to reaffirm the importance of therapy, the importance of getting help, having another person to talk to you about the experiences that you're dealing with. And that's what we offer through our Level Up program. It's one-on-one counseling with one of us. So it's not, with a licensed therapist. And I have to make that disclaimer. But we do have a space to just be in community, talk to another trans person who can understand your perspectives, understand a bit of your experience. And so we have that moment to help you, work out your emotion management issues, help you work out your stressors. Is your job causing you stress? Are they transphobic in your household? Let's talk about it and see what you can do to make your situation better. And so that is what our Level Up program features: 5 incentivized $20 sessions for a total of up to $100 or $120 if you do our follow-up. And those kinds of opportunities for trans people are so important because I think for me, if I didn't have that space to pursue therapy, to get my life together, being trans may have been one of those things that I just kind of put in the back burner, decided to ignore, and decided that it would be easier for me to continue living as I was than to actually pursue transition. So I think being in that space, being at APLA also, when I was able to be in community with so many, older queer people across generations who were doing, who are way more comfortable in their identity, that just made me even more sure that yeah, that experience just isn't me. I love these gay men. I think they're great. In another life, being a gay man sounds fun, but it's just not my story and not my journey, So yeah, I think it's one of those things that, going back to a lot of the points we made, transitioning is something that goes on forever. And I'm still nowhere near, at my goal or whatever goal. But I think that, I'm just so happy to be in a position where I'm able to figure this out and be affirmed in every step of the way. and let other trans people know that they are also affirmed, no matter how they're feeling, no matter how they're choosing to deal with their transition, no matter how early or whether they choose to transition at all. You know, we are here to support you. And I just want to remind everybody of that before we close, since we are a little over. Sorry, Kwame. I just want to reaffirm everybody that, you know, we are here for you. And that's why Trans Connections exists. And we are so lucky that we have a program by and for trans people who is here to serve the community, who understands you on a fundamental level, and who at the end of the day is going to is making an effort to connect you to care and services that are going to benefit you in the long run. So yeah, with that, I think I want to thank everybody so much for being vulnerable, for sharing your stories on this platform, and remind everybody to reach out to Trans Connections, follow us on Instagram, hit up our hotline, all of that, because we are here for you. We are, you know, trans people who are running this program. So you can be assured that we're always going to put the community first. So yeah, with that, thank you, everybody. And big reminder that we will be back tomorrow for our TDOV special at 12 p.m. So yeah, we'll get a chance to have a quick statement and also see our interviews, followed by live performances, spoken word and drag performances on our Instagram Live. So yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for your vulnerability. And I will be back next week for the link. And we will all be back tomorrow for our TDOV special. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.